Yeah. What's that?
There's a lot of memes going around about like how Nick Saban wants all the LCAT keys honest.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, as someone who demands perfection, not that's not what we witnessed on Saturday. So yes, so they did not do so hot, but that's okay. They've won enough. They've won a lot over the last decade. I mean, there are those of us that were fans of them before they were good. And so that's there. Go. But for those people who just know them since Nick Saban, it was interesting. There's Bear Bryant was the head coach for a while back in the day. He was really good. And then and then Gene Stallings took them to like a national championship in the 90s. And then there's this big like drought for where they were not good. And I actually, there was a guy named Bill Curry who was a head coach there who actually was a good friend of my uncle's. And he was one of those coaches that no one knows about because he was the coach of them when they were horrible. And and then Nick Saban comes along and just implements this kind of new system, and they all of a sudden start doing good. But well, not all of a sudden. It took time to build that quality, but yeah, that's not what we witnessed on Saturday. So we'll see how Mississippi State does with them. But hey, gotta hand it to Tennessee, right? I mean, they're looking good this year for the first time in a long time. So, I mean, I remember they were good. There was this guy named Peyton Manning that was their quarterback at one point in time, and that was when I started following them. And then before he was at the Peyton was at the Broncos, he was with the Colts. And so when I watched him win the SEC championship, I was like, man, wherever this guy goes, I'm going to be a fan. So I became because Alabama, we don't have a professional football team, so we kind of pick whatever we want. So I became a Colts fan as soon as he was drafted, and then we went to Denver. I became a Denver fan as well. So, but now he's no longer there. So I'm back to being teamless. People say I should pick the Bears, right? I don't pick the Broncos again. All right. Yeah. There's this guy. I actually went to school with this guy named DeMarcus Ware that played. Yeah. He was a little older than I was. So he graduated as I was starting, but he came back and would do some alumni stuff with us, and was pretty talented. Yeah, pretty talented guy. But because he went to Troy, which no one really knew. There's not a whole lot of professional football players that come from Troy, but he's one of the few. So he would come back and do a lot of stuff with us. So I worked in the Office of Advancement at Troy, so I got to work some alumni gigs with him. Very, very down to earth guy. But anyway, where are we going with that? Yeah, football. And now it's basketball season, right? So now we got what NBA just started. Hockey's in full swing. It is, yeah.
Everything's better.
That's I tend to agree. I guess you could do it when we get to persuasive speaking. You could do a persuasive speech, advocating for one side or the other. And yeah, when I was out at Gonzaga, I got to go see the basketball arena, and so didn't get to meet any of the players, but they're supposed to be good this year in college basketball. So it was pretty exciting to see it. You're right; they kind of are out there by themselves. So we'll see how it shakes out. But let's talk about this class. It's been a couple of weeks, right? So thank you all for. I know it was kind of a last minute thing. My wife had to go essentially to the emergency room or urgent care. and left me without a car on Wednesday a few weeks back. And so I know that was a kind of a last minute modification. So if you hadn't had a chance to watch those videos about delivery, make sure you do that. And then last week, of course, being gone gave you a week to work on your speech. So hopefully you utilized last week productively. Tonight, the goal is to review. I'll also show you the rubric that I use to grade, because I like full transparency. I want you to know exactly what I'm looking for so that you can give me exactly what I'm looking for so that you get all of the points you possibly can. So I don't like surprises as a student myself, right? I want clear transparency in grading. And so I share and provide you that template. So I'll show you where you can look at that, as well as use it as a checklist as you're preparing your speech. I'll also give some reminders. I'll give some tips and talk through what next week will look like, because next week will look different than any of our previous weeks, because it's speech delivery day for our first formal speech. So I'll talk through that. And then if you have any questions about the speech, about either the delivery or the outline, or what next week looks like, once I get through all that, then there'll be time for questions. And then that's kind of our day today. So somewhat of a light day. So I appreciate you being here, but I felt it was important for us to at least touch base face to face before next week, because next week is the first of the big 3 speeches. There's a lot riding on it. And we do a lot of preparation for the first big speech, and then we build on that. So the persuasive speech will be a lot easier, because all we're learning is essentially how to make a speech more persuasive. So focusing less on facts, focusing more on logos, ethos, and pathos, and ramping up the persuasion. So the how you write a speech is going to be the same. So we don't necessarily have to cover that again. We just talk about the nuances, the things that make it different. And then you're ready to go forth and do a persuasive speech. Once you get done with your persuasive speech, then you just do one more speech. That is the CRO speech, where you choose either to go the direction of informing us or go in the direction of persuading us. And that's it. So those are the last of the assignments. We're also kind of reaching midterms here, right? I mean, have any of you taken midterm exams in other classes yet? No? Maybe coming up, midterms coming up, because aren't we in week 8? So, or week 8 was last week, right? So oh, is this week 8? Oh, okay. So this is week 8. I'll need to correct that on the announcements. So, yeah, so I know I got an announcement to submit midterm grades. So I usually do that after informative speeches. So I'll have to look to see what that deadline is here. Because if it is the end of this week, then I'll have to submit it just based on the grades that are in. And but I usually try to submit those after, or usually time it out so that it's after informative speeches. Also, after this week, you'll see that there's less reading. Really, once we get done with the informative speeches, the only reading you have is related to persuasive speaking. And I think it's 2 chapters, maybe. And that's it. So 2 chapters, 2 quizzes. And so I don't know if you remember back at the start of the semester, I talked about how this course is front-loaded. The bulk of the assignments are within the first 8 weeks. So the fact that you're here and it's week 8 means you're doing something good. It means you've made it this far. And it's going to be somewhat downhill after this, because it's really just applying everything we've learned from the first 8 weeks. So there is less lecture the second half of the semester, because it's just about persuasive speaking. Yeah, and then just applying what we've learned to these final speeches. All right, so let's take a look at. Let's start with the course resources. So you'll see when you go to the course underneath module 4, course resources, bunch of things for you. This is where you'll find the outline template. So just a reminder, I've provided feedback on drafts, but just a reminder that this is the share screen. Speech outline template, that this is the template that should be used for your informative speeches. And just to kind of review where we are in the process. So the first thing we do for our formal speeches is we select the topic. Then we write a draft. Then we write our full sentence outline. That's due the day of speeches, so right before class on Wednesday next week. You deliver it next week, and then there's a reflection assignment. The reflection assignment is completed after you do the full sentence outline and delivery part of it. And it just gives you a series of questions to read through and reflect on. I think it's maybe 500 words. It's not extensive. It's not a large, like paper, for example. It really is just reflecting on the process of going from speech creation to speech delivery, and maybe things that you could do better, things that you want to maybe incorporate next time you give a speech. So this is that process, right? So you selected your topics by doing the preparation stage of the outline. And so just this top part, right? So the method, the type, the organizational pattern, and you submitted that as a discussion post to claim your topic. Then you expanded on that by doing the keyword. Some of you did more than that in the drafts that I looked at. I was very impressed. Some of you did full sentences for the entire body. That wasn't required, but again, the more you can do for a draft, the better. And so, but it just needed to be at least full sentence for introduction, conclusion, and keywords for the body. And so what you're doing this past week and this next week up until next Wednesday is you're expanding that draft into this full sentence outline. So this is going to be, you still keep the preparation stage, right? So you keep this format in place, but you've got full sentences, you've got citations, both in-text citations and verbal citations, and then you've got your sources in the references section at the end. So that for us is our, like our paper, right, is like an essay. That's what we write in this class, are these outlines, speech outlines. Next week, you're going to deliver it. And so we'll take a look at what all is included in delivery, which is referenced to the videos from the other week. And then, like I said, the reflection. So that's the 5-step process for the informative speech that we are doing. And so we're kind of towards the end of it, and that you will be able to deliver, submit your full sentence outline, and then have a week to reflect. So, so this is that speech outline template. So do make sure, and this was something I wanted to make sure to mention after looking at some of the drafts in, because all my speech classes right now, even the 3 or actually 1, 2, 3, 4 online ones that I'm doing right now, everyone's at this spot of submitting drafts. And so, so do make sure that you're keeping this, what this looks like, right? So what's bolded should stay bolded. Keep the, A, B, C, D. Keep the, you can remove subpoints, supporting points. That's fine. You don't necessarily have to include that, but or main point, you can remove those words. But I do still want to see transition. You can remove summary plus preview, but I want to see a transition. So I like those labels for the introduction, for the preparation, introduction, and conclusion. I like those labels to stay there. The body of the speech, again, your main point can just be that, your main point. And then your supporting points can be either bullet points or they can be numbers like here. And I like to see that clear transition between those main points. Just a reminder, if you want to look at an example, I have that in the course resources as well. And again, using the outline template, you can kind of see how I changed the formatting to, I actually bolded the A, B, C, D, so it stands out. But again, you can reformat it to look more like this if you want as well. So again, just the labels and the information that you are including. And that helps me because I'm usually reading these very quickly. And so if you don't have attention step and just A, I'll still know it's your attention step, but it just helps me as I'm essentially using the rubric as a checklist, going through and saying, do you include this? Do you include that? Do you include this? And so by making sure those labels are still there, you are able to communicate to me so I don't miss anything. You're able to communicate to me what is there. So here you'll see with my body, I don't actually have listed here main point. I just have my main point. So that formatting, again, a lot of you had it. It wasn't necessarily this class where I saw that a lot. It's my online classes. And then here you see transition. And I actually italicized my transition just to make sure it stands out as something different from my main points and subpoints. So again, the formatting is preferred, not necessarily required, but it just helps me ensure that I, as I'm reading through these, that I catch everything that you have, at least when I do the checklist part. So when I grade, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for, do you have it? And is it quality? So those are the two things. And so that's why I go through it first and just essentially check, yes, do you have it? No, do you not? And assign a points there. And then if you have it, then I look to see, okay, is it quality? Is it a complete sentence? Is it, is grammar correct? Those type of things. Yeah, so if you want to look at this example, this is my civic engagement news instructor example that's found in course resources on Blackboard. So again, make sure those references are in APA format, which again, those of you that had sort references for your draft, not everyone did because it's not required to have references in your drafts, but you will need to make sure you have them in your full sentence version. So this is what you are then taking once you have your full sentence draft or full sentence outline done. You're then taking that and putting them on 3 to 5 note cards. So make note of that specific number. So, I mean, you could have less than 3 if you wanted, but essentially it's, if you have 3 note cards, it's 1 note card for your introduction, 1 note card for your body, 1 note card for your conclusion. We also want to make sure that we are not using both sides of a note card. We want to keep things on the front of the note cards. What I recommend, I'm kind of transitioning a little bit into my tips part of tonight. So this will be up here, this lectern. And so with this lectern, you will have space to put out your note cards, right? You can set them up here, 1, 2, 3, right? Just have them laid out here. If you have 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have them in order, have them numbered. I had a student, I was teaching a class, it was a Saturday class at Wilbur Wright College, which is like on the west side of Chicago. And poor student, she forgot she should only have 3 to 5 note cards, and she had like 15 note cards. And she didn't have them numbered. And sure enough, she got up here and she dropped them by accident. And they went all over the floor. And I felt so bad for her because she had to spend time. We ended up having to go to the next person because she had to spend time getting them back in order. So learn from that mistake, number your note cards. But again, don't have that many, have between 3 and 5. If you have 5 note cards, right, that could be 1 for your introduction or 1 to 2 for your introduction. 1 to 2 for your body, 1 for your conclusion. Their conclusions are usually a lot shorter content-wise. So those are my recommendations for that. And again, you're just pulling out keywords. And so part of this is after you've written the full sentence outline, read it out loud, right? Start rehearsing it out loud. And as you start doing that, identify what keywords help you recall the rest of the sentence, right? I mean, this is something you've written, so you should be able to retain at least some of it. But as you are rehearsing it, whether it's a statistic, right? Or a quote, if you need to write the specific quote on here so that, or on your note card so that you get the quote right. That's okay. But just make sure that you have keywords, phrases. Again, the sentences you have would probably be quotes or statistics you want to make sure to remember, but that's part of extemporaneous delivery, is you're not reading word for word from your note card. You've rehearsed it enough that you've internalized, right, for Aristotle, you've internalized your message. And so you don't have to read word for word to know what you want to say. And that's what we've done some practice in, right, with specifically the Chicago places. Some of you did good with that extemporaneous delivery. So so make sure that you are prepared to do that extemporaneous delivery. If you get up here and read word for word from your note card, you'll lose points. If you get up here and don't rely at all on your note cards, it's a little harder for me to determine, but we also don't want to do that because memorized delivery. If we get nervous, if we forget something, then we've lost time, lost our spot. So use those note cards as like a reference point to go back to. And it's okay to look down at your note cards. You'll want to make sure you're still making good eye contact, and extemporaneous delivery helps us do that, helps us with good eye contact. So just a reminder that as you are rehearsing, wherever you rehearse your speech, whether it's in the bathroom mirror or maybe in your room, or maybe in front of a friend or a sibling, wherever you're doing it, make sure to be aware of the space. And this was one thing mentioned in the video from a couple weeks ago, but that speaker's triangle or speaker's triad, I want to make sure to remind you about that, is we want to make sure that our starting point is here at the lectern, but we want to make sure that we step away from the lectern at some point in time. We want to make sure we don't turn our back to the audience, so we don't want to go all the way up here, because then I risk having my back to some audience members. So the farthest we want to go would be probably right here. And so that triad is either 2 or 3 spots, right? And so as you rehearse, practice starting at a starting point and moving to a second point that doesn't block your visual aid, right? And then if you want to move to a third point for just a brief point in time, you can. That may block your visual aid, but make sure that if you are going through your visual aid, that you're not in the way of it. So that may require you to move back to either of the other spots. And you're not necessarily doing a race between the 3. You're just, maybe you're starting here with your introduction, and then maybe you take a note card with you and you do part of the body of your speech over here with your note card. And then you can go back to the lectern, right? If you want. And so it's just maybe as simple as that, but that'll be one of the things that I'm looking for is movement. Specifically, are you utilizing the speaker's dyad or speaker's triad where you move away from the lectern? And that can be a little tough because we feel very safe behind here, right? It's kind of this barrier that protects us from the audience. And so, but step away from it and but still make sure you are giving us good eye contact, good gestures, those type of things that are talked about with delivery. So those are my reminders and notes about that. So yeah, make sure your outline looks like this. If you want to download this, it is a Word document. So if you want to download this and if you haven't formatted your speech to look like this, you can just insert your information here. Let me go back to Firefox. Let me go to, let's go to, here we go, informative speech rubric. So this is the rubric. You'll see it in the student resources. This is what I'll have in front of me as I'm grading it during speech delivery day. So this is what I'll be listening for, right? So in your introduction, can I audibly tell, right? Your introduction, your attention step, your rapport step, credibility step, and preview step. So you have that attention step. Are you getting our attention? Are you starting with wow? And this is where a lot of people trip up, specifically because this is the first formal speech. So make note that you are not starting with hello, my name is, but you are starting with whatever your attention step is. Whether it's a quote, whether it's a story, whether it's a statistic, that's what you start with. You reserve your name and, hello, my name is, thank you for being here today. That's elsewhere in the introduction. You could do that as part of a rapport step. You could also do that because we're all in this classroom. So you could say, thank you very much for being here today, right? That's a common shared experience. Credibility step, what makes you credible? Why should we listen to you? That's where you can mention your name. But we don't start out in a formal speech like this with saying, hello, my name is. We start with that attention step. So make sure you practice doing that. So story, quote, statistic, something that starts with wow. And so that's why I recommend when it's your turn to come up to the lectern, you'll come up here. I recommend you pause, take a deep breath, and then, make sure the clicker works. I'll have a presentation remote up here for you. I think we practiced using one last time. I have a different one, larger one that we'll be using next week. So that's a lot bigger. So it has a very big center button that you press that center button, that's going to go forward, and the smaller button below it goes backwards. So it also, the very top circle dot has a laser pointer. Ooh, yeah, I can hear your amazement. So that's the presentation remote that we'll use next week. So so that way you can step away from the lectern, still be able to go through your slides. In fact, I think it's connected actually via Bluetooth right now. So anyway, you can step away from the lectern and take this with you and still be able to navigate your PowerPoint. So I recommend you stand up here, you pause, you take a deep breath, you check to make sure you can go forward in your PowerPoint and then go back to the starting slide. Then when you're ready, you start with your attention step. So attention step, rapport step, establishing that common ground. I'm sure we've all heard of this, or we may know about that, right? So building that rapport. Credibility, I saw in a lot of people that you're citing a credible source, which is good. That's part one of the credibility step. Make sure you also answer the question why we should listen to you. Are you passionate about this subject? Do you have experience with this subject? Just saying, I've done research on this subject is sufficient to complete or kind of answer to that psychological question that the audience is asking us. Why should I care what you're saying? Why should I listen to you? Because that your audience does. They ask that. Not verbally, but in their minds. Why should we listen to you? So you need to respond to that just out of the gate. And that's part of the credibility step. So make sure you include that, stating your credentials. And then again, you can cite an expert, but I'm trying to guide people more to also make sure that it says or citing an expert, I should change that and. So stating your credentials and citing an expert. Preview step, make sure you're previewing those main points. Today, I'm going to share with you main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. We should hear those main points so that we know what to expect. And that's the point of the preview. The body of the speech, what I'm listening for is going to be logical development of your main ideas. I'm going to be listening for examples, stories, analogies. But most importantly, I'm going to be listening for those verbal citations according to this source or as stated in this journal, as mentioned by this journalist. I'm going to be listening for those in-speech verbal citations. And then I'm looking for emotion as well. It says all public speaking involves some degree of pathos. And we'll dive into pathos, which is emotional appeals when we get to persuasive speaking, but all speaking is persuasive. And so show some emotion, get excited for your topic, and that excitement will help enliven your speech. So make sure you're bringing some excitement. And I saw a lot of you have that excitement about your Chicago place. Bring that excitement to your informative speech. Those transition statements. I want to remind you that the transition statements are vitally important for making sure your speech flows. If you don't have clear transition statements, your speech comes across choppy. Remember, that's I think the most of the feedback that I provide when someone doesn't have clear transitions is speech was choppy. Improve those transitions. And so making sure, and that's why I have this summary plus preview. That's just a note of what one way. Remember, we in the textbook, they call them connectives. And there's a variety of connectives, transition statements being one of them. The way I was taught was transition statements is that all-encompassing word. But the best way, in my opinion, to do a transition is to summarize just what you just shared with us and then preview what you're about to share with us. So now that I've shared with you main point 1, next, let me share with you main point 2. And so that type of transition statement helps us go from main point to main point. So now that I've shared with you main point 2, next, let me share with you main point 3. And then you don't need a transition statement. I think the outline template has a spot for a transition after the 3rd main point. And so some of my feedback when I saw people have a transition there was just a note, you don't have to, you just would need to do that if you had a 4th main point. So once you're done with your 3rd main point, you go right into the conclusion. And so there's no need to have an additional transition statement. Matter of fact, I should probably remove that because people got confused. Again, I don't know necessarily in this class, but the online class. So verbal delivery and vocal delivery. So these are the things that I'm looking for. So as you're rehearsing this week, use this as a checklist. So are you articulating? Are you using good professional dialect? Are you using any stylized language, parallel structure, or repetitive phrasing, right? And we've seen some examples of that repetitive phrasing when we watched a couple video examples a few weeks back. I'm listening for extemporaneous delivery, right? So are you stepping away? Are you the way I identify extemporaneous delivery is you don't necessarily have it memorized, but you aren't reading it word for word. And so the words are chosen at the moment of delivery. That's what we're preparing for. That is a true extemporaneous delivery. So the words are chosen at the moment of delivery. When I was in college, this is going to be probably news to some of you. When I was in college, I often competed in freestyle rap battles. And because I know, right? I look like type, right? I know. Because I would write poetry, and poetry and rap go, in my opinion, go hand in hand. And so a lot of people would be like, man, because we would compete, right? I don't know if y'all still do this or not, but we would compete, right? So Saturday night, we'd meet up at someone's house, maybe a fraternity house or somewhere else, right? And there'd be a group of people who'd be like, all right, someone would start playing a beat. We also had a lot of musicians around who are really good at what we call, I guess, beatboxing, maybe an outdated term. But and then we would just start flowing, just start doing whatever we had prepared. But that's the key point, is prepared, right? It wasn't truly, even the best freestyle rap is not truly on the spot. There's preparation that happens behind the scenes. There's even some of the best, like Eminem, had notebooks where they would write their notes of the different lines and phrases that they would piece together. And so this is very similar. You've prepared in advance, and then when you get to class to deliver it, the words are chosen at the moment of delivery, but you have prepared enough. You know what it is you want to say. You know the lines that you want to piece together when you get up here and freestyle for us. So that is essentially the kind of analogy for extemporaneous delivery. So you've prepared in advance. You've prepared enough to be able to come to the class and deliver extemporaneously. Make sense? And no, I don't have any lines in my head. I was asked that at work the other day. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to even say some of it. Some of it I could, I wish we did, because this was before everyone had video cameras on their phones. I'm kind of dating myself. So there may be something floating around out there. But I know what we did have was on this site called MySpace, which no longer exists, or at least not in its previous form. So yeah, anything we did have was on MySpace. But at some point I have my notebooks where I wrote down lines that I need to get those out of storage. And if I can find them before the end of the semester, I'll bring them. Because I've had students ask, I was talking with coworkers about it the other day. They're like, oh, we'd love to hear some of what you wrote. I'm like, I don't know if you really want to hear it. Some of it may not have the best language. I don't know. I was in college, right? So, yeah. So, extemporaneous delivery. Also, what I'm listening for is volume. Are you loud enough? Is your pitch, the highness and lowness, the inflections, the rate? So how fast are you speaking? And when we get up here, we tend to be nervous and we tend to talk very fast. And so make sure as you are rehearsing this week that you're intentionally slowing down the rate or the pace of your speech. Because when you get up here, I'll be timing you. And so you'll need to meet that 3 to 5 minute window. And if you're talking too fast, it may be too short. So make sure as you're rehearsing, you're timing yourself and you're adjusting the speed of your delivery to ensure that you are within that time frame. Pauses. Let me talk a little bit about pauses. And I know I do this in the video lecture, but just a reminder that when we pause, we tend to want to fill it with something, with an something like that. And we're all guilty of it. It's just part of speech. But when we're speaking formally, for a formal speech, we need to make sure we limit those vocal fillers. So when we pause, practice breathing. Practice taking in a breath and letting out a breath when we pause so that you're not filling it with a sound. And so that's what I'll be listening for that as well. I don't take off a lot of points for it. It's like 2 points total, but I am listening for it. Ultimately, what we want is good vocal variety. So are you increasing your volume? Are you increasing your pitch, your tone to add emphasis to things? That emotional expression that comes through in the sound of your voice. That's what we're looking for, right? Emphasis on things, right? Get excited and share that excitement through your voice when you're delivering. Nonverbal delivery. So I've already talked about a few of these, so I won't go too in-depth into it. Just make sure we're avoiding those nervous quirks that we do. So if you have long hair, we tend to want to push hair out of our eyes. If we are, maybe we have an itch we need to scratch, and that's fine. But we want to make sure that all of our gestures that we're doing with our hands are intentional, right? And I give examples of that in the lecture from the other week. But make sure that they are intentional, not just random. So practice again using those gestures. So then I'll listen for that key word, that cue in conclusion, so that I know that everyone knows you've gotten to your conclusion. I'll be listening for you to review your main points and then end with wow. You'll then get some points if your conclusion is the appropriate length. So if you just say in conclusion, this was my speech, thank you, and sit down, that's too short. Right? You need to make sure you have your cue, your review, and that memorable closing, that story, that statistic, that ending with wow. We start with wow, we want to end with wow. A couple other things that I'm grading for, I'm looking at your visual aid to make sure that it uses some of the techniques that are mentioned in the lecture related to visual aids, or using good design principles like the 6-6 rule. So no more than 6 lines on a slide and no more than 6 words on a line. That's that 6-6 rule. So make sure we're not doing any thick paragraphs. If you do want to put a quote on there, that is okay, but just make sure that's on a slide by itself, is that quote. You can put the quote with a picture. That's fine too. And in some of my lectures, you'll see examples of that. You can embed audio or video if you want to, like I do in my lectures. We watched some videos or had some videos automatically play. If you are going to show a video or an audio clip, it should be very short, right? That's not what your speech is about. Well, your speech is whatever it is you are delivering. Any kind of audio and any kind of video is to support what you are saying in your speech. But if you do want to include audio or video, make sure I would embed it, because what that does is it eliminates those YouTube commercials, right? We've all been there, right? Where we go to pull up a video and we have to watch a commercial before we can get to the video. You may have had professors that do that, right? And so the way to avoid that is to embed that video into PowerPoint. And if you go to insert in PowerPoint, you can insert pictures, you can also insert media, and that's where you would insert a link to a YouTube video. You can also tell YouTube, or you can tell PowerPoint where you want that video to start. So if it's not at the very beginning of the video that you want to show us, you say, okay, I want to start 30 seconds in or a minute in. You can do that when you are embedding it. So again, that way we avoid those commercials and you ensure that it will play. When you get up here to use your PowerPoint, you'll want to make sure there'll be a little text box that pops up that says enable content. You'll want to click that before you start your PowerPoint presentation, because if you don't, then the video won't play. That enable content allows you to put it into presentation mode or slideshow mode. And when you get to that slide, all you have to do is click next on the slide and the video plays. And again, the examples I give that, I have a lot of lectures where I do that. I embed those videos into my PowerPoint. So then I'm looking for time. So are you under time? In which case you get, this says 5 to 7. I think I changed it in this class 3 to 5, right? That's what it says on the assignment. So I think that 5 to 7 was because that was a City College of Chicago rule. So if you're under 3 minutes, you don't get any points. You get a 0 for that part. If you are over 5 minutes, you only get 5 points. But if you're within that 3 to 5 minutes, you will get all 10 points. And so make sure, again, as you're rehearsing, you're timing yourself, and that way you make sure you are within that time limit. Sound good?
Sure.
So rubric, let's see, was there outline, rubric, delivery, rehearse and revise. All right, let me share just some tips and talk a little bit about what next week is going to look like. Let's do PowerPoint. Hide floating meeting controls. There we go. All right. So a couple notes about next week. So the first thing is you will need to submit your PowerPoint to the Dropbox before class. And I know we practiced this already. Not everyone got it in before class, but you have to make sure it's in before class starts, because there won't be time. Once we start delivering speeches, we go. And so make sure it's the same link that we used for Chicago Places. So I'll post it via an announcement this week so that you can go and submit that. But just know it'll be the same link that we used for Chicago Places. I'm just going to go in and delete the Chicago Places speeches or PowerPoints. And then that way, when you submit it via the Dropbox link, again, it goes directly to my computer. So I don't have to download anything from Blackboard, which saves time. And so it allows you to submit it on up until the start of class and still have it here. Whereas if when I was having students submit it to Blackboard, I would require them to submit it the day before, and so that I could download it before class. And some students would be like, oh, but I updated it, within the last day. And so I just switched to using Dropbox so that when you submit it, it goes directly to my computer. So again, I'll repost that as an announcement before next week. But again, you can also go to the Chicago Places announcement from a few weeks back, and it'll be the same link. Delivery order. This is often a question that I get asked is, who's going to go when? What is the speech order? It is randomly selected and it's posted prior to class. So I do a random sort your names randomly and post it on there. If you would like to go first, let me know. I'll put you first. Otherwise, it is a random assignment. You just need to let me know that before Sunday. because Sunday will be when I'm preparing for classes for the week. So there's only 15 of us total. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of us total. And so we may not go the entire night next week. If you think everyone's delivering a 3 to 5 minute speech, we have about a minute or 2 minutes between speeches. We may not use up the entire night. When we're done with speeches, we're done and you can go home. That is the goal of next week, is just to deliver speeches. Let's talk about missing a speech. And this is why I'm recording this for some people who are not here today, because if they are not here next week, they get a 0 for their speech assignment, which is a lot of points. And so don't want to get a 0. So make sure that if you are not here, you have a documented absence, which means you're giving me some kind of documentation that says you were in the hospital, right? Or the emergency room, which is why you were not here, or some unforeseen thing has happened. Outside of that documentation, there are no makeup speeches. So make sure that you're either here, or if you are on your deathbed, you provide documentation letting me know that. Because you'll be surprised. I have had people every semester, actually here, I don't know if I had anybody in any of my Concordia classes in the last year who've skipped, but I have had it at other schools where I've taught, where speech day arrives and there's people who aren't there. And not sure why they're not there, they just don't show up. So that's why I implemented this. You're not there, you get a 0, you got to provide documentation in order to make it up. Otherwise, there are no makeup speeches and we move forward. So the other thing that to make note of is at this point, you should be rehearsing, revising, and rehearsing your speech. So you're going through this rehearsing process. And you can rehearse in front of someone. I would encourage you to do that to get that peer feedback. But at this point, you should be rehearsing, revising, and rehearsing. Because as you rehearse it, you may say something differently that you like, right? Because you're rehearsing it extemporaneously. You may start by reading it word for word, but then slowly as you get off of the page and onto your note cards, you'll say things differently each time you rehearse it. You'll either like it or not. And so you're making those choices. And so that's why it's okay to rehearse and revise. And you should be rehearsing and revising as you go through this next week. And then I already mentioned 3 to 5 note cards allowed with you up here when you speak. So no computers, no tablets. You can use the actual note cards, or if you want, you can take a piece of paper, cut it into 4, and that gives you a little bit larger size of a note card. But essentially, that would give you 4 sheets of paper that you could use to write your notes on. If you have to write really big, that's usually what. For students with visual impairment that I've had in class, I've recommended they use that bigger, cut a sheet of paper into 4, gives them the bigger spot to write so they can write a lot larger. If you need an accommodation of some kind like that for delivering your speech, just reach out to me before next week and we can make those accommodations. So next week, what is it going to look like? I'm going to sit in the back of the room. In one of those 3 chairs that are currently open back there. And I'm going to provide time signals. So when you get up here to give your speech, you essentially ignore me except for the time signals that I give. And the time signals are essentially when you've reached your 3-minute minimum, I hold up a 2, meaning you have 2 minutes remaining. When you've reached 4 minutes, I'll hold up a 1, meaning you have 1 minute remaining. When you have reached 4 minutes, 30 seconds, I'll do this signal, which means you have 30 seconds remaining. And I've stopped doing a 15-second signal. So really 30 seconds is the last time frame. These are actual cues that we give in competitive public speaking. And so when I was a judge and a coach at the University of Alabama for our speech competition that we had, they would ask me sometimes to sit in the back and give those time signals. So that's where I first learned it, actually, was in competitive public speaking. But yeah, so that's what we incorporate in this class. So 2 minutes remaining, 1 minute remaining, 30 seconds remaining. And another way to think of it is when you've got 30 seconds remaining, this looks like a C. So get to your conclusion. If you've not gotten to your conclusion and you have those 30 seconds, it doesn't matter where you're at in your speech, you better get to your conclusion because you only have 30 seconds left. And for a 3 to 5 minute speech, your conclusion should be between 30 seconds and a minute. So if you're speaking slowly and not super fast. So just ignore me in the back. So when you see those time signals, I've had some people, when they see me hold up a time signal, they look like a deer in headlights. Oh, and they just like stop in the middle of their speech. Don't keep going. And I'll try to hold it up long enough for you to make eye contact with me, because you should be making eye contact, around the room. So make sure I'm one of those spots that you give eye contact so that you'll see that. And then when your eyes pass me, I'll put it down. And but don't let that stop you when you see the time signal. But you know what it means. So that way that can help you stay on track. When you've reached the 5 minutes, I'll do this. If you've ever watched, what was that movie? The Larry Crown Affair? What was the name of it? You ever seen that movie with Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, she's like, my wife was like, oh, you gotta watch this. It's an older movie, but she's like, you gotta watch this, because she's a speech teacher. And he's like an adult student going back to school, taking a speech class. She has a little bell at the end. I don't have a little bell. Maybe I can find one, or I can download an app and ding a little bell. But I've just been doing this, like timeout. So when you've reached your 5 minutes, you'll see this sign, and then you have about 15 seconds before I'll interrupt you verbally and say, you're done. Thank you. So look for those time signals. If you mess up at any point in your speech, do not apologize to the audience. Do not say, I'm sorry, I messed up. If you messed up, just keep going, right? If you start and you mess up and you're like, man, I'm off track, then pause and start again, right? But don't apologize. Don't say, I'm sorry, I messed up once you've started. It hurts your ethos. It hurts your credibility. We're all here for you, right? We're all here to support you. Everyone in this class has to give a speech. We want you to do well, right? And if you mess up, that's okay. Just keep going. And it says don't repeat or start over. Again, if you're completely off track, I recognize, and I've recognized over time that, okay, you may need to start over. But if you're deep into your speech, right? If you're a minute into your speech, if you start over, you're going to run over time. And so that's where, you don't necessarily want to repeat or start over. Just find your spot in your note cards and pick up there. As I mentioned, you want to practice slowing down, because our tendency is to talk really fast. So make sure as you are rehearsing, you're intentionally slowing down the speed of your speech. We want to stand up straight. So we don't want to lean on the lectern at all. It's not for leaning. We want to make sure we're standing up straight. If anything, we can rest our forearms on the lectern. We would like to do that. If we want to grasp it here, that's fine. But again, you should be using your hands for gesture. We're not necessarily leaning on the lectern in any way. So stand up straight, speak loudly and clearly, and everyone's full sentence outline will be due before the start of class, just submitted to Blackboard. I think I've covered all of that. So what questions do you have in preparation for next week?
What was that outline you showed at the very beginning?
Yeah, the example of an informative speech, that one. Yeah. So this is my example. It's civic engagement news period instructor example. That's under course resources on Blackboard. And this is, you got it. And this is a speech that I wrote modeling the how to write an informative speech, what I'm looking for. It gives you a visual example, because the student outlines were just drafts. Those aren't, the fleece blanket and the Orlando, those were just keyword drafts. Those weren't perfected versions, final version. This is a final version. So this is taking it from draft to what I should see next week. Looks like this. Yeah, it's called Civic Engagement News Period Instructor Example. Yeah, under course resources. So again, it's a Word document. If you want to download that and just insert your information there, that's fine too. You don't have to. Again, if you already have an outline that you did, right, a draft, keep going with that. But you can change your formatting, right? You can bold things. You can, like I said before, remove where it says main point in the outline template and just put your main point. Remove where it says subpoint and supporting point and just insert either bullet points or numbers for your supporting points. Transition, you can remove that summary plus preview that's in the template. You can remove that because that's just a reminder for you, and insert your transition. So yeah, so that's an example of a final full sentence outline that I gave. And if you want to listen to an imperfect delivery of this, I do have that linked. Should be in the assignment for the Civic Engagement News Practice speech. There's a video, YouTube video link that gives you the example that I did. When I did this example for the first time and recorded it, we were still completely 100% online because of COVID. And so it's an online video recorded speech. So imperfect, I'm not using body movement like you should because I'm in front of the screen. So yeah. But what other questions do you have as we prepare for, think about next week? Yes. So good point. So dressing properly is going to be no hats, no logos unless it's related to your speech, and no hoodies, right? So these are going to be, so you should wear a sweater if you wanted to. You could wear, yeah. That's fine, right? And as I mentioned in the lecture for delivery, right, that aids your ethos. And I think the example I have given has been the person, I can't remember now, I think it was Pizza Hut. Right? They worked at Pizza Hut. They were teaching us about how to make a pizza. They wore their visor that said Pizza Hut on it, and they wore their apron that said Pizza Hut on it, right? That aids their ethos because obviously they know what they're talking about, right? The guy who came, so I had a student whose father was a member of the Chicago Cubs. He played for the Chicago Cubs. You may know the name Rizzo, Anthony Rizzo. His son was a student of mine. He had a Cubs jersey. And so when he came to class to teach us about the history of the Chicago Cubs, he wore his Chicago Cubs jersey. Obviously, he knows what he was talking about. And now I think he's probably wearing a Yankees jersey, is where his dad plays now. So yeah, so you can wear things that aid your ethos. So that's the exception. Otherwise, professional attire. It doesn't have to be suit and tie, but just professional sweater, button-down shirts, no sweatpants. So like khakis, blue jeans, those type of things. So, yep. So that professional attire.
Wait, we can wear jeans?
Yeah, you can wear jeans. Yeah. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And if you just want to toss it on for this class, that's fine too, right? Don't necessarily have to wear it all day. I have had people just show up, toss on a sweater, and come up here and deliver their speech, and then they took it off and went home. So, again, don't necessarily have to wear it all day, just as you're delivering the speech. Give that professional ethos, that professional credibility. What other questions do you have as you are preparing your speeches? Yeah.
Is there like a length requirement on that, or just as long as it gets your points across?
Correct. You will probably, and I maybe mention just the first part of this in the lecture, but you may want just a title slide, at least a title slide that has your name and the title of your speech. A slide for each main point, and then a slide with your conclusion would probably be the minimum you'd want. I don't have a requirement for it, but just kind of best practices. You know, so if you have 3 main points and conclusion and introduction, or introductory slide, that's 5 slides. So you could fit everything on 2 slides if you wanted. I think my informative speech was 5 ingredients for effective leadership was my informative speech in college. And I had 4 slides because I was able to fit the content, introduction, conclusion, and I was able to fit the content that I needed by doing transitions in and transitions out on the same slide. I was able to make things appear and disappear when I was talking about it. So I didn't need multiple slides. So that was, so yeah, I just had 4 slides, did mine. Yeah. Cool. What else? Yeah. Mhm.
But like, what are my topics like? Talk about rare disease.
Oh, right. I remember that one. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say is that, yeah, not necessarily want to be excited about murder, or this guy was the guy being framed for his ex-girlfriend's murder. But passion, right? Passion for the injustice, passion for correcting and making sure there is justice. That you can kind of bring that vibe to it. So not necessarily excitement, but just that kind of passion and enthusiasm for the justice or injustice that has happened, and for the justice that you're seeking be done. Yeah. That makes sense? Yeah. What else comes to mind? Other questions?
Not really about
Yes.
Receiving points for that, or just if whatever take on.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because I didn't have that. I was about to say on this slide. Yeah. So the way I rank participation is so between each speech, I'll have pieces of paper here. Sometimes they're Post-it notes, sometimes they're the note cards, whatever I can bring with me that night. But you'll have pieces of paper, or I may just ask you to pair up pieces of paper, instead of just small squares. Big enough for you to write a grow and a glow. And so I'll ask for you, after someone gets done speaking, I'll ask for you to pass in your grows and glows. So while they're giving their speech on this little sheet of paper, again, it could be just a little yellow Post-it note. I think I have a lot of those in my supply box. And just writing, just a quick little grow, which is something they could do to improve the speech if they were to give the speech again. And a glow is something they should make sure to do again, something you liked if they were to give the speech again. And so, so that's this really short grow and glow. We'll have time between the speeches for you to pass them in to whoever just gave the speech. That person will then incorporate those grows and glows into their reflection. And so that's the participation that I'll be looking for. So you'll need to be listening during the speech in order to write down grows and glows, and then you'll pass them in so that they can then incorporate those, the reflection. So then you, as a speaker, will get these grows and glows that you'll be able to read through and then factor into if you want to give this speech again. Because remember, we have this speech improvement day, very end of the semester, where you can deliver either the informative speech or the persuasive speech again for the chance at an improved grade. So these grows and glows, as well as the feedback that I give you in your evaluation to the assignment, will be what you'll consider if you want to give the speech a second time. So, but it's also what you factor into that reflection. So there aren't, I don't necessarily include points on the rubric for participation, but I'll be watching to make sure that you are passing in grows and glows for everyone. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for bringing that up. Other questions that you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. How would I like? Will I be able to like a PowerPoint or?
Mhm. Yes. Yep. So you're required to have a power. And you'll when you before you start your speech, so before class, you'll need to submit it to the Dropbox link so that it's on the computer. And then when you're up here, we'll have a presentation remote use so that you don't have to go over to the computer and click next. You can just click next on the presentation remote. So yeah. So in your notes, when you have those cues to use your visual aid, that'll be how you do it. Yep. Yep, and that's a good point. As he was just showing me, he has, right, in his outline visual aid. And so you may want to, on your note cards, put, visual aid, or you could put next, circle it, right, so to cue you to, okay, I need to hit next on my PowerPoint slide. Because sometimes, and some people usually, I have it every semester. They get up here and they get really excited, right, about their speech, and they completely forget to click next on the PowerPoint. And so as we are, and I have it every for practice speeches, and I have it for informative speeches. And so, so on your note cards, write those cues to yourself to say, okay, click next, or visual aid, or you could just say, could it be, and circle it, right, on your note cards so that okay, I need to hit next. And as you're practicing, as you're rehearsing, with your note cards, you'll be able to essentially remember that that's what that means, and it'll help ensure that you stay on track with your PowerPoint. Awesome questions. What other questions do you have? Yeah. Sure can. Yeah. I would say make it no more than 10 to 15 seconds. Because any more than that, it may be a little too distracting. So pick out specifically what you want as part of to be your attention step. But yeah, video is a great attention step. Matter of fact, I used to do, it's a little outdated now. I used to do a speech, essentially an informative speech on using social media. And I would start that presentation with this very powerful video that just gives statistics about the increase of social media use over the last 10 years. So that's how I wouldn't even introduce myself because I would give this speech, this presentation at leadership conferences and in classrooms at SXU, 50, 60 people. I was doing it for like 200 people at Washington State. It's a little outdated now because social media has changed, but I wouldn't even say anything. I would just pull up video and I would click start. I would let it play and I would get out of the way. When it was done, I would step up and start my verbal part. So yeah, there's some cool ways you can incorporate video, especially as a digital step. So yeah. Yes.
Am I allowed to bring in like examples?
You can, but it wouldn't take the place of a PowerPoint. So you would still need a PowerPoint. And just make sure you practice. So two things on that. Make sure you practice displaying it to the audience, and make sure you don't pass it around. So it stays with you up here in front of the audience, but you would just want to make sure it was visually seen. Yeah.
Nobody wants to bring in this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So for this.
Yeah. So I had, the guy who did, I had a guy, what did he did, changing a car tire, and he brought in a physical tire. It was like a donut, like the smaller tire that you would put on a car if you had a flat. It brought that in and brought like a tool set in. And those were, he still had a PowerPoint, but he brought those into the classroom and had them up in front of the classroom and lifted it up at a part during his presentation. So props, we would call those. And yeah, and that props. Yeah, just make sure you practice incorporating into your speech. I've had that for physical golf, or I don't know if you call it, where you use the, I don't play golf, clubs. There we go. They had someone bring in different types of them. That was last year. That was someone who here, someone that goes to school here or graduated. So yeah, brought in like 3 or 4 different kinds of clubs as props. Again, still have PowerPoint, but yeah. Bring your whole bag. What else? These are great questions. I know you're processing through it, thinking through it, preparing for it, which is encouraging. So means you want to be ready for next week, which is what I want. I want you to be ready. I'm ready for you to do a great job. I love informative speeches because it's the first formal speech, and I learned so much from you all, subjects that I'm not familiar with. So if you have any questions as you go throughout the week, the best way to reach me is going to be via text message, 312-857-8335. I'm all caught up now, I think, on emails from being out, all caught up on grading. Or should be all caught up on grading. So take a look in Blackboard, take a look at your grade if you want. Again, it's just based on essentially quizzes and submitting the documentation for the practice speeches. So take a look at that, because again, I'll take a look and see what the deadline is for submitting midterm grades. And if it's the end of this week, then I'll have to submit what I just pull it directly from Blackboard. So go to Blackboard, take a look at that. Let me know if you have any questions. It may not change what I submit for midterms, but at least if you are missing something major, we can talk through that. So reach out to me, let me know. I'll post the link for submitting your PowerPoint presentations to the Dropbox. I'll post that as via the announcements. I'll probably do that on Sunday. And I will post the presentation order or delivery order on Sunday as well. So make sure you're here. Again, if you're not here, you have documentation that you were in the emergency room. Otherwise, I will see you here next week, 7 o'clock. We'll probably get started around 7:10, 7:15, just to give us time to get set up. They have me on a route today that gets me here right at 6:45, I think was when I got here today. So if they keep me on that same route, I'll probably still be getting here to 6:45 or 6:50. So I'll need some time to make sure everything is set up, but it'll be just like we did with the Chicago places. We'll have the laptop there. We'll have the lectern presentation remote. You can direct your attention to your PowerPoint with your hand or with the laser. Yeah, and I look forward to learning from you all next week. So that's all I got. Thank you all so much. We're done early, so this gives you an hour to work on your speech if you want next week, or to get something to eat, whatever you want. So thank you all so much. Have a great week. And leave your name tags at your seat. I'll collect them.
Bye, have a nice night.
Hey, bye. Thank you.
See you next week.
All right. Have a good one. Enjoy the weekend. Should be warmer weather.
I'm going home this week.
Going home. All right. Awesome. Have fun. Yeah.